I think if we look also and tie up with the relatively widespread of this particular group, which was responsible for or is being said to be responsible for the Delhi blast, and also look at what is the arrests in Ahmedabad relating to the Raisin case, there does seem to be a certain pattern emerging which suggests that perhaps we are seeing an effort with terrorism in Jammu and Kashmir being substantially contained, nowhere near zero terrorism, but nevertheless being substantially contained. We are seeing an effort to revive terrorist movements or terrorist activities across the rest of the country.
So this could be the start of a nationwide terror campaign.
It could be, but it could also just as well, we don't have enough evidence at this juncture, it could just as well be a one-off.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me. Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. Today we shall focus our attention on critical questions thrown up by Monday's terror attack in the Red Fort area of Delhi. Was it a one-off attack, or could it be the start of a new national campaign of terror? Has Pakistan been emboldened by the geopolitical outcome of Operation Sindoor and its improved relationship with China and America to use its proxies to target India? Could the poor relationship with Bangladesh and the role of Harkatul Jihad Islami make India vulnerable on its eastern flank? And finally, is the government's attitude to and treatment of Muslims creating anguish that can feed terrorist designs? Those are the issues I shall discuss with the Executive Director of the Institute for Conflict Management and the South Asia Terrorism Portal, Ajai Sahni. Dr. Sahni, in an op-ed that you've written for today's Times of India, you raise the following question. Is the Delhi 2025 bombing a one-off success, or does it reflect a wider strategic shift? In other words, is this the start of a national campaign of terror? What's your answer to your question?
Well, my answer would be we'll have to wait for a definitive conclusion. But I think if we look also and tie up with the relatively widespread of this particular group, which was responsible for or is being said to be responsible for the Delhi blast, and also look at what is the arrests in Ahmedabad relating to the Raisin case, there does seem to be a certain pattern emerging which suggests that perhaps we are seeing an effort with terrorism in Jammu and Kashmir being substantially contained, nowhere near zero terrorism, but nevertheless being substantially contained. We are seeing an effort to revive terrorist movements or terrorist activities across the rest of the country.
So this could be the start of a nationwide terror campaign.
It could be, but it could also just as well, we don't have enough evidence at this juncture, it could just as well be a one-off.
In your Times of India op-ed, you also explained why you believe this could be what you call a strategic shift. For the benefit of the audience that may not have read the paper, what are your reasons for believing that beyond what you've already mentioned?
Well, you see, for one thing, the geopolitics of the global geopolitics is today extremely uncertain, extremely fragile. South Asia, in particular, has emerged as a major theater of contestation. We see that in the wake of Operation Sindoor, Pakistan was able to secure very substantial support both from America and China, two global rivals. But nevertheless, Pakistan sits rather well in both these camps. While India does not appear to have any very prominent and powerful friends, other than Israel, and I believe the Taliban were among the few administrations that supported the Indian position without qualification. So, one is the geopolitical instability. The other factor is the instability within the region. Particularly what is developing and evolving in Bangladesh. We know that after the regime, the Sheikh Hasina regime was toppled in Bangladesh, Pakistan has made very, very major inroads to restore its influence in Bangladesh. We also know that the Islamist radical elements within Bangladesh are occupying larger and larger political spaces, the Jamaat-e-Islami in particular, but also a multiplicity of other groupings which are being given great prominence and which are trying to come on to a single Islamic platform for to put up unified candidates for the elections currently being spoken of in 26 February. Now, if that happens, and if the Islamists who are consistently anti-India, virulently anti-India, if they come into power there, we would have the possibility of a restoration of a two-directional flow of terrorists into India.
I want very much to talk to you about your fears, your apprehensions about what could happen from the Pakistan side as well as what could happen from the Bangladesh side. But first, let me ask you a question. How prepared is India for this possible strategic shift in terrorism? The truth is, and you point this out in your Times of India article, that the Red Fort attack was the first major Islamist terrorist attack involving 3 or more fatalities outside Jammu and Kashmir since the Patna bombings of 2013. That's 12 years ago. So, how prepared are we if there were to be a strategic shift in terror?
I think we are better prepared today than we were when we had this massive wave of bombings across the country between the late 1990s and roughly 2009-10. Maybe up till 2011, a few incidents continued. We are now much, much better prepared. First, we have dismantled most of the major networks of support in India, which were principally headed by the Students' Islamic Movement of India and the Indian Mujahideen. Without local facilitation, it is difficult to for outsiders to launch attacks in any target area. So that is an important thing. The other thing, the very fact that we've gone 12 years without an incident is not because of a want of trying. I think this is numbers I have mentioned, that our database shows that at least 82 persons have been arrested this year for various conspiracies to commit terrorist acts in the name of Islamic or Islamist extremism. Last year, we had 80 such arrests. So the effort has not lacked, but we have been very successful in containing or neutralizing these conspiracies well before they reach fruition. This teleblast is an exception. One slips through. This will always be a residual risk. There will always be a possibility that every single terrorist conspiracy cannot be detected and interdicted prior to its completion.
But you do believe that we are considerably better prepared than we were 12 years ago?
Absolutely. There is far more awareness. There is far more efficiency and competence in police forces, especially in specialized agencies which are focused on counterterrorism. Our intelligence agencies have better capabilities today. I would here qualify a little that there tends to be greater and greater reliance on technical intelligence, which is important. I do believe that we perhaps are losing focus on the pre-radicalization stages because of our lack of the depth of human intelligence that we used to rely on earlier. But I think that is something that is correctable. And there is an awareness in the intelligence communities that human intelligence needs to be given as much, if not greater attention than mere technical intelligence.
That certainly prima facie sounds like good news. Against that background, let me talk to you about the potential threat from Pakistan, and after that, the potential threat from the other side, i.e., Bangladesh. And I'll step back a little when I talk about Pakistan and ask you this. What is the possibility that an emboldened Pakistan, encouraged by the geopolitical outcome of the Pahalgam massacre and Operation Sindoor, and also strengthened by its improved relationship with America and its very secure relationship with China, might seek to provoke terrorist attacks through its proxies in India? What is the possibility of that happening?
Very high. I mean, if I look at it from a Pakistani perspective, that is the only option available to me, other than simply sacrificing all my ambitions in the region and sacrificing my claims to Jammu Kashmir. So if I remain committed to first of all, my claims to Jammu and Kashmir, and more importantly, my historical animosity to the Hindu India, as they describe it, I cannot abandon my purpose. And if I cannot abandon my purpose and I am unable at this juncture to do anything directly in Jammu Kashmir due to two factors, one being the far greater dominance of our security forces and intelligence apparatus there, and the international attention any operation in Jammu and Kashmir would immediately attract, and the direction of responsibility or blame would automatically be point towards Pakistan. So Jammu Kashmir has to, in some sense, be brought down in terms of priority. There would be greater deniability available, not absolute deniability, but greater deniability available for actions outside Jammu Kashmir today. So from a strategic perspective, and given their basic policy and orientations, it is a natural direction that they would seek to escalate terrorism across the rest of the country.
If the focus of Pakistani designs is, to quote your words, to escalate terrorism across the rest of the country, how prepared is the rest of the country for this?
Substantially. This does not mean that there won't be terrorist incidents. There will be. As I said, we'll catch hold of a lot of the conspiracies. A few will slip through the cracks. So there will be, but if I am correct in my surmise, and please understand all this is speculation. I do not have any hard evidence to suggest that Pakistan is in fact launching a India-wide campaign of terrorism. But if they do, there will be some successes, as they have been in the past, and we will absorb them, as we have done in the past.
So there will be a price we'll have to pay, but we will absorb it as well, and we will, in the end, be able to tackle it. But there will be a price to pay.
If this is Pakistan's intent.
Okay. Let's then come to Bangladesh. In your Times op-ed, that's that extra additional step you go. You say at the moment, we have a global environment of geopolitical fragility in South Asia, a deepening relationship between Pakistan and Bangladesh, a country increasingly hostile to India, and where the hostility could increase after the Bangladeshi elections in February. Are you worried, or maybe I should rephrase that, ask, how worried are you that we could see a recurrence of the problem of the late 1990s and early 2000s when Pakistani terror groups and the Harkat-ul-Jihad-e-Islami in Bangladesh seemingly combined to target India both from the east and the west?
Well, I think even if there isn't such a collaboration, I think we would see a escalated risk from Bangladesh independently, because the groups that are likely to come into power, I would say almost certain to come into power after the elections, are groups that are not only viscerally anti-India, they are groups that have been historically linked to the terrorist movements. The Jamaat-e-Islami, for instance, is really the parent group of all the terrorist groupings in Bangladesh. The leaderships of all the terrorist groupings in Bangladesh came from the Jamaat-e-Islami. or were people who had gone through the Jamaat-e-Islami network. And the Jamaat-e-Islami is already extremely influential, even under the interim government. They are, moreover, trying to come together, bring all Islamics, we call them Islamists, they call themselves Islamic parties, to bring them all on a single platform, put up single candidates. If that happens, we could see a complete and absolute majority of Islamic extremists in the Bangladesh parliament post the elections. If that happens, then given their positions, given their history, I am certain that they will turn their ire against India, either independently or in collaboration with a willing Pakistan.
Now, for the
And
last
there is a history for this because these groupings had all combined with Pakistani groups to execute joint operations across India through the early 2000s, right up to 2009, 10, 11.
So this would be going back to what they've already done in the past.
Exactly. They were not able to do this for all these years because Sheikh Hasina had clamped down on all these groups very, very harshly, had completely wiped out the terrorist organizations, though the radical groupings such as Jamaat-e-Islami, which proclaims it has no, Jamaat-e-Islami Bangladesh, which proclaims it has no terrorist or armed linkages, but is nevertheless the source of the radical ideologies. They were allowed to continue to substantially function. They control very large networks of madrasas across the country, and they have continued with their radicalization propaganda and programs without interruption.
Well, let me ask, if this were to happen, and I know there's a big if there, but if it were to happen, how prepared are we to handle it?
As I said before, better prepared than we've ever been. This does not mean that there won't be terrorist incidents. There will be. We have our own internal vulnerabilities and we need to address those. But India has survived far worse. At worst, we had more than 5,000 fatalities across the country, 5,500 fatalities across the country in the single year, 2001. We had a maximum of more than 4,000 fatalities in Jammu and Kashmir alone. But India is still where it was. And we were much less prepared, much less capable in those days than we are now. We have better equipment, we have better training, we have better, far more experienced people. We are sharing experiences across borders, state borders. We are sharing experiences and capabilities with neighboring states, among affected states. So I think sharing intelligence with far greater efficiency. So I think we will get greater and greater success. However, if the adversary is relentless, as I think Pakistan is and Bangladesh may be, something or the other is always going to get through. No country in the world can actually, I find this phrase absurd, the Home Minister's phrase of zero terrorism in Jammu and Kashmir. I think that is extremely unwise to speak of things like zero terrorism. No country in the world, much better equipped, much better resourced countries, have been vulnerable to occasional terrorist attack. Much richer countries, much more prosperous and equitable communities have been susceptible to terrorist attack.
So once again, you're saying there will be a price to pay. We don't know how large, but we will be able to handle the situation.
Absolutely. I have no doubt that we will be able to handle the situation.
Now, the interesting thing, Dr. Sahni, and you point this out in your Times of India article, is that although the National Investigation Agency has been brought in, and although a case has been filed under the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, the government has not as yet officially declared the Red Fort bombing a terrorist attack. Is that because their pronouncements after Operation Sindoor have, in a very real sense, boxed them into a corner?
Absolutely.
Once they declare it a terrorist attack, they'll have to treat it as an act of war.
Absolutely. I think the government had painted itself into a corner right after Operation Sindoor with that statement of every act of terrorism will be treated as an act of war. Now they will need to find a way out of this current conundrum, either in terms of blaming the local conspiracy or the Prime Minister has already very clearly said this is a conspiracy and that we will get back to every last conspirator. If they are to avoid an action of an escalated sindoor, then they will have to find a face-saving way of saying this is not the responsibility of Jaish or Lashkar, but of some other group or of a local group, or linkages may be established to what are called the international terrorist organization. We are already hearing some talk of the Ansar Ghazwatul Hind, which is an Al-Qaeda affiliate, being blamed, despite the fact that right from the beginning they've been saying that the entire investigation and the recoveries in Faridabad were triggered by the pasting up of posters in Srinagar of the Jaish-e-Mohammed. But now they are slowly seeming to retract from that. We do not have access to the evidence, nor do we have access to the internal discussions of the government. But I think the government has certainly put itself into a position of some difficulty.
Let me at this point, Dr. Sahni, ask you two connected questions. To what extent is the government's attitude to, as well as its treatment of Muslims, and perhaps Kashmiris in particular, antagonizing the Muslim community and creating the foundation for acts of terror?
I have never really believed in the root causes theory. I do not believe that you have to address every grievance before you can begin to eliminate the risk of terrorism. Mostly the people who are engaged in terrorism are not people who have been direct victims of state oppression or state excesses. Most of the people who join are ideologically mobilized. This does not mean that we should neglect the Muslim or that no harm has been done to the Muslim under the present regime. I have written again and again of the extreme iniquity of the state's policies. But I would not link terrorism. I mean, there was terrorism before this regime came in, earlier regime. In fact, there was far greater terrorism in regimes that were purportedly secular. So I'm not going to link grievances directly with terrorism. But yes, if we would have a better administered state, if we have fewer grievances in particular communities, I think we would have far greater cooperation from these communities against the terrorists. We would have communities standing against these groups and cooperating with the security agencies with information, giving them prior notice of anything that may be questionable, suspect going on within their communities.
I hear what you're saying, Dr. Sahni, and yet your article in the today's Times of India has a prognosis for the future that one can only call grim. You write in that piece, the Red Fort blast demonstrates that a residual risk of Islamist terrorism will remain and is indeed likely to grow. That's not good news.
Well, absolutely. Again, I mean, all that we've been talking about, the global situation, the fact that South Asia is a deeply contested region, what is happening to our east and our west, and of course, the internal fissures, the politics of polarization. It is not, when I say that we shouldn't see Muslim grievances as a source of terrorism, that does not mean that we can completely ignore Muslim grievances. They are legitimate Muslim grievances. They are legitimate grievances across the board. So it's not only Islamist terrorism that we are at risk of. We are celebrating the collapse of the Maoist movement today, but none of the problems that the Maoists raised have actually been addressed. So there is a growing pool of resentment in this country, which will find articulation in some measure of unrest. And I am today at a point where India is seeing perhaps the lowest levels of manifest violence in decades. More pessimistic about India's future stability than I was when violence was peaking in the early 2000s.
Because of this reluctance to address the problems.
Because of the not only reluctance to address the problems, but the progressive escalation of so many problems, the growing iniquities, the growing inequalities in the country.
In which case, let me end by asking, in these circumstances, what is your advice to the government?
Well, nobody's going to listen to my advice. And the only thing that I would say, the advice to any government, not just this government, is that good governance is what this country needs. Equitable ideologies is what this country needs. We can't keep on with this blind ideology-led policies which do not look at consequences, which simply go that this is the ideology of our group and we are going to impose it on everybody irrespective of the consequences. Or this is where the advantages of our cliques lie. And it doesn't matter what price the common man has to pay. It doesn't matter as long as certain groups or certain classes are benefiting or the GDP is continuing to grow. It doesn't matter how many millions are marginalized by the process. It doesn't matter that we are destabilizing the country as long as we are able to gather our vote bank around polarizing ideologies. If you keep on thinking like this, then I'm afraid you are guaranteeing a future in instability, not perhaps terrorism, because the instability will articulate itself in different patterns. As I said, we have learned how to manage terrorism in a substantial measure, sometimes crudely, sometimes with some finesse. But there will be other patterns of manifestation. We have seen this around us. There is a point of time where resentment boils over. We've seen a collapse of a regime which nobody thought would collapse in Nepal. We saw the collapse of a regime which had just won an election in Bangladesh. We saw the collapse of unchallenged power of a regime in Sri Lanka. Of course, everybody celebrates and says, oh, it can't happen in India. Well, if you went down to Sri Lanka or to Nepal or to Bangladesh a few months before the collapse of the regimes, that's what the people thought there as well. They thought they had constitutional systems and nothing could bring them down.
And yet it happened there, and if we aren't completely careful, we run the risk of it making it happen here.
Absolutely. We run the risk.
Dr. Sahni, on that grim note, let me ask you one last question. It's a coincidental question, but I think it's a relevant one as well. Yesterday, by coincidence, there was also a fairly major suicide car bomb in Islamabad. 12 people were killed. Mohsin Naqvi, Pakistan's interior minister, has blamed India. How do you respond to that?
Well, this is, in fact, had it not been for the statement about, every act of terror being an act of war, our leadership would have blamed Pakistan immediately after this attack, even before investigation started. Shahbaz Sharif, within hours of the incident, had already said this is a state-sponsored terrorist attack from the neighborhood. Something to that effect, not precisely the language. So this is the default setting for both sides. Something happens there, they immediately blame India. Something happens here, we immediately blame Pakistan. And no evidence is needed. But everyone who is aware of of the dynamics of what is ongoing in Pakistan knows that this is a Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan attack. Knows that Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan is very much a product of Pakistan's own policy failures. The siege of the Red Mosque. That the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan is born out of the Red Mosque group, which was a group heavily patronized by the Pakistan army. And this is what happens in Pakistan. They patronize terrorist organizations, then they lose control. In this particular case, this group has gone and found common cause and common ideology with the Afghan Taliban. And today they've become a major strategic threat to Pakistan. But it serves the Pakistani political discourse to constantly link India to this, because just as anti-Pakistan sentiments are a strong mobilizing device of political mobilization in India, so anti-India rhetoric is a very strong mobilizing device in Pakistan.
Dr. Sahni, thank you very much for the time you've given me. Thank you very much for sharing your concern that this could be, I underline the word could be, the start of a nationwide terror campaign, but we hope it is not. I'm very grateful to you. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you for having me.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.